Welcome back to the McCann Dogs podcast, episode 18. 18? 18?
18.
18. And you know what's a great thing is if we talk about socialization in our dog training.
Let's do it.
Because it's an important, I can't believe how often I forget. I wonder why I forget the episode numbers so easily.
I don't know.
I don't know why that is. Because we do them so infrequently. But,
Must be.
When we talk about, this is a super popular topic when we're coming, when we're talking to all dog owners, especially over the last couple of years. It's been quite a challenge with socialization and what it actually means. But I can tell you quite simply that socialization is probably not what you think it is. Socialization has a lot more to do with experience than it does interaction. And this is a common misconception for a lot of dog owners. And they think if they don't get their dog out, and I've actually seen checklists that seem dangerous to me, but, that say, your dog needs to meet, 5 people over this period of time, and they need to meet 10 other dogs. And I just think, oh boy, it's kind of scary. And we'll probably be talking to them later about, some other training challenges they've got. But when we're talking about socialization, I think there are a lot of myths, and I think we should talk about those myths first.
You bet. So first and foremost, I would say the biggest myth is that socialization is about interaction, and it is not. It's about exposure. So you do not have to let your dog play with every dog they see or meet out there to have them be well socialized. And in fact, it will actually do the opposite. If you let them greet and say hello to every single dog out there on the street, I can almost guarantee you that at some point your dog will have a bad experience. But bigger than that, even if every single experience is a good one, it rehearses and reinforces bad manners.
Yeah.
It rewards your dog if they're pulling to go and see another dog and they get there and they get to greet and say hello, and it's an enjoyable interaction that basically tells the dog to pull you to get to that dog. And that'll get worse each and every time. As the frustration builds from being held back, it'll get worse, it'll get bigger, and a lot of the times that bigger reaction where the dog is now so excited they see another dog approaching and they're up on their back feet and their front feet are up in the air, and that dog that sees your dog coming probably doesn't understand that the dog is doing that because they're being physically held on a leash. They think this dog is coming at me. It can change body language to a point where it is a misread situation by another dog, and that in itself can cause squabbles and fights out there on the streets.
Yeah. And I think, we talked a little bit about this last episode. I'm not really sure why people want their dogs to play with other dogs so much, because in my mind, I got a dog for me so that I could take this dog, go do fun things with them.
You bet.
So that we could, have a relationship, and that, the dog would love, going to play fetch with me and going to, do all these things. I do understand that it's a simple way to exercise. I do understand that people let their dogs just run free indiscriminately with other dogs in like more urban areas where they feel like, I don't have a lot of room to exercise them elsewhere. But in today's episode, we're going to talk about some solutions to that, and maybe how to pick a good playmate for your dog, because that's really important. There is value in your dog being exposed to other dogs. There's lots of value there, but to do it the right way is really important.
Yeah, most definitely. And what we want to do when we pick playmates for our dogs is pick dogs that are going to match your dog's play style, pick dogs that are going to be under good verbal control so that you can stop the play whenever you need to. Sometimes things will escalate, even with 2 dogs that know each other really well and normally play very well. Yeah. Sometimes the mood is just that and things get a little bit out of hand. So I always want to make sure with my dogs that I have the ability to stop the play instantly should I need to. I don't want there to ever be a situation where my dog's physically outside of my control on a verbal situation. I want to be able to always address them. Yeah.
The other thing I think that people sometimes believe is that their dogs need to play a lot. They need to do lots and lots of play. And that's just not the case. We have lots of examples on our YouTube channel that talk about different ways to exercise your dog if they're not quite ready for a long walk. But playing with another, when we're as dog trainers, we're so focused on building relationship with the owner.
You bet.
And the last thing we want is to make that any more difficult than it needs to be. And by allowing your dog to just indiscriminately play with other dogs, you're making it more difficult than it needs to be.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's just the way it is. Dogs are fun. Other dogs are lots of fun. If you let your dog go and play nonstop with other dogs, that is going to be what their focus is. And, that's fine if you are happy to have your dog just want to play and interact with other dogs and not really do a whole lot with you, then you can certainly, go that route and enjoy. But if you are hoping to do some training and have a good engagement and good meaningful relationship with your dog.
And have a dog that listens.
Exactly.
This is
and
a mistake
wants
that I made.
to be with you.
Totally.
My own dogs, when there's other dogs around, they choose me.
Yeah.
And that is because I've set the situation up so that they understand that I'm the rewarding thing in the situation, not the other dog.
Yeah.
Very rarely does the other dog become a rewarding thing in any given scenario. Most of the time we're in class and I want my dog to specifically ignore all of those other dogs. Whatever it is we're doing, I do a lot of field and a lot of obedience with my own dogs. But even in an obedience class, you've got dumbbells flying all over the place, which is an obedience retrieve element if you're not familiar with that.
It's not a person.
Yeah, exactly. You've got dogs chasing toys when they're being rewarded for things. There's motion and action. And I don't want my dog thinking about going and joining that other dog in play. I want him wanting to play and interact with me while I try to convince him that obedience is a really fun thing to do. So I'm going to set myself up right from the get-go so that my dog doesn't think just because there's another dog in the room, the party is on. I want him to clearly know, you know what, that other dog is not any fun. They're not an option. It's me you need to focus on.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that we need to talk about briefly is, when people are out for a walk or they're maybe at the park or somewhere where someone says, hey, my dog's really friendly. I think he'd love to meet your dog or whatever, someone might say. Some of the dangers, especially with dogs on leash, because this is where we get a lot of people in for behavioral training because they've had one bad event in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about that on the onset of the show that, it's just not worth the risk. It rehearses all the wrong behaviors, but that single event learning situation can set you back so much. And if you've ever had a dog that has been flattened on leash, you know this, you've felt this, you've seen this. And certain dogs, certain personality traits in dogs, they're going to bounce back from that, no problem. But there's a lot of dogs that it is going to set you back. And you're going to end up in a situation where now you have to take your time and you have to slowly work through potential reactivity on leash, potential overreaction when they see other dogs. A lot of the times if a dog gets concerned about other dogs coming into their space, they will learn to act big and tough to try to keep that dog at bay. And a lot of the times it works, right? That's the difference. So if a dog coming down the street is having this big tantrum where they appear terrifying and another dog walking towards them goes, you know what, I don't want anything to do with that. And they either turn and go away or, the owner usually won't keep bringing that dog into the space of a dog that's reacting. So the dog that's reacting gets reinforced. And basically in their mind, it gave them a situation where it worked, acting tough worked. And then if it doesn't work the next time, a lot of the times the reaction gets bigger because the dog thinks they need to make it a bigger reaction so that other dog will stay out of their space. So a lot of the times it's a worry that builds that response. And we don't want our dogs feeling that out on the street. We want them to know that, you know what, yeah, there's another dog over there. It's no big deal. Pass with manners and you might get a cookie for it.
And in that situation, if you don't have the dog that's kicking and fussing and making a big stink, and you have the dog who's like, geez, I'm not too sure about this situation, and they are on leash, normally they would just say, you know what, I'm just going to go that way. I don't need to be part of this. But then we insist on our dogs getting closer, or, we insist. And even if it's not, a very obvious response from the dog who maybe is a little, being, I don't know, barking and doing whatever, maybe the dog is completely still and we're just not paying attention to some of the signals, some of this, the collection of symptoms that the dog is showing, saying, I don't like this. And we want our, puppy in training, this cute dog to meet a German Shepherd or to meet whatever, a a golden who's, maybe this golden's not too comfortable with this situation, but my puppy's never met a golden, so this will be a great experience. That's not the case because your puppy may be picking up on some signals that this dog doesn't really want me to be this close. But now that we've got them on leash, they're trapped. Normally they would escape the situation. But in this case, and this is where we get people in and they say like, I just didn't, I thought he was friendly. They said he was friendly, or from the dog park, I've gone there for every day for 4 months. And then one day, all of this changed.
Yeah. And we hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking every single time. I mean, I am cautious to a fault with my dogs, but I know with 100% certainty the worst thing that happens is nothing.
Yeah, right.
The worst thing that happens is I keep them safe. I would much rather potentially look rude to a person out on the street that I'll never see again than put my dog in a situation where they might get flattened and I might have to come back from that. It's a terrible leadership message for my dog because it basically leaves them floundering on their own. If I let my dog get flattened by another dog on the street, my dog is going to lose faith in my ability to keep them safe. So as a good leader, I am so much better to have my dog think, you know what? I really want to take my cues from you. And I
trust you.
Exactly. And I trust that you're going to keep me safe. And those are the things that help your dog understand that you're worth listening to. If you leave them out there to flounder, or if you reward the wrong energies, all those things, they set you back so much. And we want our dogs, I said in the last episode, I was stealing someone else's quote, that we want our dogs to look at us as somebody who gives good advice, because that's what good leaders do. When we are looking for help in our lives, we look to our leaders for advice so that they can give us some guidance, and we want our dogs to do the exact same thing with us. And in order to earn that respect, we need to make sure that we keep them safe and we give them confidence that we are good leaders and we are going to give them good advice.
So with that in mind, and knowing that, we do want our dogs to be comfortable with other dogs over time, how do we keep them safe? How do we set them up for success?
Yeah, I never take the risk with strange dogs. I actually have 5 rules that I put down on paper in an older blog post that I have to have met before I allow my dogs to play with other dogs. And I will qualify this. I mean, Ned plays with Reggie. And I have a very close trainer friend that our 2 dogs will occasionally have a romp, very infrequently though, because most of the time we're together to train. And by the time we're at the end of our training session, our dogs are pooped and they don't really want to play. They might want to take a nice relaxing hike where we'll walk the property and, the dogs will sniff, but they really don't pay that much attention to each other because they've had all of the emotional and physical needs that they have already met by us, by the human in the situation. So now they're just decompressing, they're wandering around, they're sniffing, they're boys, so they're peeing on things, and they're just enjoying their time. But there's not this intense desire to run off and play with those other dogs. In meeting my 5 rules of dog play, first off, I have to know the dog. And that is so crucial. Making sure that I know how that dog is going to react, what that dog's play style is, etc., is what is going to keep my dog safe and keep him having confidence that I'm not putting him in bad situations. The dog must be friendly, which seems obvious, but if I don't know the dog, I don't know that he's friendly. Yeah. And if I don't know the human, I don't know that I can trust the human saying my dog is friendly.
Absolutely.
Not only do people make mistakes when they're reading their dog's body language and when they, their dog is reacting out on the street and they're yelling, he just wants to play. A lot of the times that's the assumption and it is wrong. But in addition to that, a lot of times people will put their dogs in bad situations and cross their fingers.
Right.
And if you don't know that person, you don't know if that's that type of person. So for me, when somebody says, is your dog friendly? Or, my dog's friendly if yours is, I just say no and I keep walking because I have no allegiance to that person or that dog. I only have allegiance to my dog and I need to keep my dog safe. So it's not worth the risk to me.
Sorry, just to interrupt. The other thing I know that people have said is that the person's whose dog was, rough or whatever with their dog at the dog park, that person was taking their dog to the dog park to socialize them because they barked at other dogs on walks and they thought that this was a great way to even the dog out. And I don't want my dog to be a test dummy.
No, not even. I love that. Not even close. And a lot of the times there's there's a disconnect here as well, not just in the situation of putting your dog in the wrong scenario where they're going to play. There's also a disconnect in understanding that there is leash reactivity, and those same dogs that are horridly aggressive on leash can often be perfect off leash. Yep. So, I mean, there's a huge disconnect in that too. There's so many variables when it comes to dog behavior. It's just not worth the risk. Totally. It's just not worth it. If you don't know the dog and you don't know the dog is going to have a nice play style with your dog and is under very good verbal control, it's simply not worth the risk to have the two of them play. And I meant to qualify earlier. I would say like Ned plays with Reggie and Ned plays with my trainer friend's dogs occasionally, but that's it. You know, he both of my dogs, they don't need to have a million other friends. They don't need to have a bunch of hours of play with other dogs through the week. They need their emotional and physical needs met. And I try to do that so that they're not looking for those things elsewhere. And that's what makes me a good leader, worth listening to, worth looking to for advice. That's what makes them want to do things with me and want to listen to me instead of wanting to lunge at the other dog on the street. For sure.
And it makes, especially when you have a dog in training, I mean, we're talking about trained dogs here, but when you have a dog in training, this is what speeds up your training. This is why your dog chooses you more often, why they'll listen, you know, when there's a tough distraction going by, because you've reinforced for them that you're worth it.
Yeah, you bet.
Listening to. Now, I know a lot of people listening to this are probably thinking, well, you know, I don't have dog trainer friends. What do I do?
Yeah. And you might not have dog trainer friends. You might have a friend with a nice dog. That dog may or may not be a good match for your dog. Another one of my rules of play is that they must match your dog's play style. If I've got a wrestling lab with a whippet that loves to run and that lab tackles the whippet, that could be a disaster, for example. And that's not to say the lab is bad. It just doesn't have a whippet play style. Right. It has a lab play style. There's no scenario on this earth where I would ever have a dog like a Great Dane playing with a Chihuahua. As cute as that is, I mean, it's adorable, of course. One paw put in the wrong place could be absolutely a disaster. Like those are things that we just need to make sure we're very, very careful of. We want to make sure the dog is in good health. And I mentioned already as well, I want to make sure that the dog is under good voice control. So those are my 5 rules of play. I have to know the dog. They have to be friendly. The dogs have to match play style. The dog must be in good health and the dog must be under good voice control. And if those things are met, then I will allow a little bit of play. But we don't just allow our dogs to go play with the intention of saying go play and then letting them burn off steam. We use the play session to further our obedience and our training and to further teach our dogs that we are awesome and worth listening to and way more interesting than that other dog. So, do you want to talk about?
Well, I'm thinking about one of the things that we would do with our own dogs, and this is definitely something we work on with, you know, when we have a young dog in training, or if we have a friend's dog who's in training, is they'll always have. If we aren't sure, then we'll drag a line. But in this situation, I'm thinking, you know, this is a dog who has verbal control. We're not. This isn't a puppy in training at this point. We want good verbal control. Why do we want that verbal control? When do we step in and use it?
Anytime things get to a point where we don't like what we're seeing. You know, it might be the slightest little escalation that you don't like, and it might be a bigger escalation. But basically, what we want to do in a situation where there's energy and potentially conflicting energy. So if we send our 2 dogs out to play and the energy starts to escalate and they start to get to a point where, you know, they're one-upping each other a little bit too much or they're getting a little bit too intense, we want to be able to simply stop the interaction. And not as a disciplinary measure. Nobody's doing anything wrong. They're just playing, but we need to take the energy out of the situation. So I want to be able to call my dog right away so that I can bring him to me. And I was starting to talk about this a little bit. Basically, what we use our play sessions for is to teach skills like that, is to teach our dog to be able to turn when we call them off of other dogs. It's to be able to interrupt play and have our dogs understand that that's not the end of the world. You know, the last thing I want to do is only call my dog away from playing with another dog when I'm about to end the play session and get in the car and go home. Because pretty quickly, my dog's going to learn that the fun ends with me. And that's a terrible message for him. I want him to know that the fun is the best fast with me. So I use play sessions when I have a young puppy that I'm working socialization with and they're playing. I specifically set out so that I can practice response to name. It's more about practicing response to name out of that play session than it is about actually letting them play. So I might let them play for 10 or 15 seconds, and then I'm going to work on a response to name. And when my puppy comes out of that play session, they're going to have an impression left on them that was a really wonderful thing to do. So I will have their favorite rewards. You know, that's a time where they get a hunk of cheese or their absolute favorite be all end all toy and lots of good play. I might have my puppy then settle and I'm going to work on something that reinforces focus on me. You know, it might be a high five or a shake of paw, something really light and fun that allows them to earn reward. And then the ultimate is that I'm going to tell them, okay, go play. And I'm going to let him run back into play again once, you know, my partner, whoever's working with the other puppy, is ready for that as well. I'm going to give permission to go and play. And I always call things the golden nugget of dog training. That's one of those golden nuggets because it makes all the difference. If your puppy or your dog understands that they're only allowed to play when they're clearly given permission, the other options are taken off the table, right? It's simply not an option for you to lunge and pull and try to visit that other dog on the street. It is never going to happen. You're never going to get there. We take that option away, but we replace it with the idea that there's so many better things to do to start with. And the fact that we've called them away from play, the fact that we've ended that good time doesn't mean that the good time is over permanently. It's actually such a win-win situation for the dog. They come out of play, they get lots of great rewards, they get a little interaction and engagement with us, and then they get to go back and play again for another few seconds before the next call out.
This is something that we work on in our puppy classes. You breezed over one section that I think is more important for our listeners than we might think about or you might realize. But the idea that when you've got the dog committed to you, you can talk about a high value reward, which is really important. But having the dog continue. You said work on a short exercise that's focus on me. You can't understate that part of it because you are competing against maybe one of the toughest distractions you've competed against in the dog's life.
You bet.
You know, because they speak the same language. Your puppy's, loves to play. It's just grown up with a bunch of litter mates, loves to play with other dogs. Now you need to teach the dog that it's worth practicing a sit.
Yeah.
It's worth using some self-control because I'm going to, really make it worth your while, but it's something that you must do.
You bet. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm rehearsing my puppy listening while he's in a high state of arousal, which is such an important thing to do. I mean, we talk about learning calculus on a roller coaster, right? So if the roller coaster is the play with the other puppy, that is the fun, that's the excitement, that's this really wonderful thing that our puppy's doing, and the energy gets high. And there comes a point on the roller coaster where the listening brain just shuts off. If it's not been practiced, if it's not rehearsed, that the excited and aroused brain can still think and can still listen to the cues that you're giving them, they're never going to be able to listen in that state. So while I don't want to start teaching a behavior on the roller coaster, I certainly want to make sure that by the end of that behavior being taught, my dog can listen to it on the roller coaster. So I need to practice in that state of arousal. I need to practice in that excitement level. And the play with other dogs often gives us that great opportunity to practice that. The other ways that we can practice that are by initiating our own play. I'll do a lot more of this with playing with toys with my dogs. I'll use things like flirt pulls, the hose, for example, to get my dog really excited. There's nothing more exciting in the world for Ned than water. And, chasing the hose and the water stream around the backyard, there's no way that he would be able to listen if I didn't rehearse him listening in that situation. He would get so excited. And I've noted tons of bunnies on the property recently. This is the season apparently, and they're everywhere. And in the last week, I've called him off 3 bunnies just on this property alone. And I can tell you for a fact that the opportunity to rehearse him listening in that high state of arousal with things like the hose and flirt bowls and other toys and calling him out of play with other dogs, those are the things that make it possible for him to have ears that can actually hear me when his predatory instincts kick in and when he's chasing that thing full out, which is what's going to happen when they're in play, right? They're rehearsing predatory behaviors as play, and their listening ears turn off if they don't get a chance to practice it.
When I was out on one of these walks, I saw a bunny putting a sign in the ground that said duck season. And I thought that was appropriate. And that's probably why we see, because it's duck season right now.
It must be.
According to this bunny.
That must be it, absolutely.
Then I saw a duck putting a sign that said rabbit season. So I'm not really sure who to believe. How would somebody know, what are the progressions when you're working with this dog in training, as our listeners have chosen a great playmate for their dog. They are getting great verbal response, around a tough distraction. They're reinforcing a ton when their dog gets back to them. When are they taking the line off? When are they making it more challenging for their dogs?
So taking the line off, just to clarify, taking the line off won't necessarily make it more challenging for the dog. It'll make it more challenging for you to get control of the dog should things go awry. Okay. So if you take off the line, it should be because you feel like you are confident as can be that the chance of your dog responding is really, really high. And I would say greater than 99%. Having the line on, it can be a little bit of a pain in the neck in play sometimes. But when you need it, it is so helpful to be there that it is worth its weight in gold. And just being able to, if I called my dog and he didn't respond, I want to make sure that I can get control. I'm going to march in. I'm going to calmly walk in because I don't want to make it a scene. I don't want my dog to see me coming and think they need to hightail it out of there. I want to set up the training situation. So if I call my dog and he doesn't respond, the line allows me to make it happen. So I can walk in, I can very calmly step on that line to prevent my dog from going any further. In a perfect situation, the other person that has control of the dog that your dog is playing with is able to call their dog. So the fun ends there too. And now I can go in and I can train my dog. So I'm going to step on the line. My dog's probably excited about that other dog. If he's ignored me, now I'm going to back up my response to name by calling his name, giving him a touch or a little, pops on the leash, something that makes him go, oh, you were talking to me, and makes it happen, because I don't ever want my puppy thinking or my dog thinking that it is okay to ignore me. Then what I'm going to do, I'm not going to send my dog back to play right away because I'm probably going to rehearse the same thing that just happened. What I'm going to do is I'm going to practice his response to name in that scenario, but I might take a step or two away from that other dog. So I'm a little bit further away. I'm going to practice response to name. If my dog gets it bang on each of the rest of those times, then I might give him a little bit more freedom in that scenario. I might get a longer line. I might give him a little bit more space away from me and keep practicing that response to name. I'm probably not going to send him back into play though, because he's just told me this is too much. I'm not ready to respond in this scenario. So I'm not going to rehearse that. We talk a lot about rehearsal and how much it can work against you. So I don't want him thinking that this is the scenario where he gets to ignore. So I'm not going to put him back in that situation until I feel confident again. I'm definitely not going to take off that long line until I am so confident that things are in place that I have really no concerns about it.
I'm sure at some point someone will say, like, well, I'm worried about the dogs tripping over that long line. Like, I'd never let my dogs play on a long line. And I think, while I can understand that approach, if that were the kind of play that we're going on, I wouldn't allow that kind of play either. This is where selecting the right playmate for your dog is appropriate. Maybe that playmate isn't constantly crossing back and forth, leaping on one another, whatever would it poses some inherent risk. I wouldn't allow a dog to play with another dog if either of them are in danger for any reason.
Absolutely.
What's most important is you have control of your dog with that long line. So if that means you don't play with this specific dog, then that's just the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And teaching your dog to be responsive to you around other dogs is going to be so much more beneficial to you than your dog getting to have that play session. So I would say, if you're of that mindset that you don't want to use the long line and you're worried about it being potentially unsafe in play, totally understand that. You can set it up so that it is much safer by having a specific type of line, something that's like a very light cotton web or nylon line, no handle on it. That's definitely going to be helpful for not getting caught around things. You can make it a little bit shorter if you need to. It just needs to be long enough that if the dogs are playing and you're not getting response, you can calmly walk in and step on it, and you're not in a situation where your dog's playing keep away and they're, I would say if your dog is a dog that's playing keep away, playing with other dogs should not be your top priority. Absolutely. You need to get more obedience skills on that dog. You need to get more enjoyment and more understanding that listening to you is a really worthwhile thing and a really good thing for them before you start introducing other distractions like that.
I'm sure the question will come up at some point about daycares.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had a daycare here at McCann Dogs for a while. And people will ask, well, geez, I don't know what to do. I'm away too long. I take my dog to daycare. Are you guys telling me that this is not what I should be doing?
Daycares are... they can be a challenge. They definitely can be a challenge. I know sometimes people have to rely on daycares, and I've written an article about how to pick the right daycare and things to look for, sort of things to be concerned about, things to make sure that are in place there. There are situations where people will need to use daycares. I would avoid at all costs personally. I would go the dog walker route with an individual dog walker where you can give specific instructions. If your dog just needs to get out through the day to go to the bathroom, I would be more than happy to have somebody come in, let my dog out of the crate, bring them outside to go to the bathroom, make sure that they're fed, and then put them back in the crate so that when I get home, I can go through all of the training they need and they've had their needs met through the day. But I would much rather take that opportunity than to just blanket go to daycare, and especially with a puppy. There's so many reasons for this, and we won't get into 8 million of them, but the big ones. First off, it takes the excitement out of the relationship that your dog shares with you. It also rehearses them being in a state of over-arousal all day, which is not a good place to be all day long. Over-arousal is a great place to visit. If you've got a dog that you want to do sports with, or you want to jog with, or you want to have fun with, or you want to do anything with, we want to have some drive in that dog. It's not a bad thing to have our dogs be excited and be fiery in their responses, whether we're doing obedience or agility or fly ball, but we don't want them living there all the time. And being in that high state of arousal all day, every day is so terrible for your dogs and for their overall emotional state. It also puts so much focus on running and playing with other dogs. It puts a lot of focus on things that are external factors from you. The nicer thing about daycare versus leash-free parks is that you don't have the anonymity factor there.
Right.
So at least there's dogs that, have owners behind them. They can't just, there's a dog fight and then when you turn around, the person has left the park with their dog and you have no recourse left whatsoever. Hopefully the dogs have been vetted and they are at least friendly, and there's hopefully somebody there monitoring the play group who is able to read dog body language, who is going to be quick to step in and stop things from getting rehearsed. If I had to choose a daycare, I would look for one that had structure. Definitely not anything that ever said cage free or, free run.
Yeah.
I never want my dog to be stuck not having a quiet place to be. Totally. And again, that over-arousal, that state of over-arousal, it can be very agitating for some dogs. And if they can't find a quiet place to just go and decompress and relax without being harassed by other dogs that are in the cage-free facility, that can often be a really, really detrimental thing for dogs that will start to manifest in other areas of their life as well.
I think back to, when we were doing some of the daycare, and the dog's day would consist of training.
Yeah.
Each dog would get specific training, and then they'd go in their kennel for a bit, and everybody be napping away, and then there might be a short play session with a couple of dogs, depending on, they were matched based on their play styles, and then back into their kennels for lunch, and then so on and so forth. But the day was all about training exercises, and these were all students' dogs who had come to us and learned how to do some of these exercises. But I have some reservations about anytime I take my dogs to boarding, or, if I have to, or I probably would never leave them in a daycare personally, but I'm always worried, don't ever put my dogs in a situation where there's a bunch of other dogs.
Yeah.
I just don't want that, because I've seen what can happen. But sometimes I'll ask, whatever, the couple walks a day, or whatever, go out and exercise session, but I'm always in the back of my mind thinking like, geez, I hope that's independent. I hope they're on their own, because I do worry about what socialization skills, if the person administering the walks and whatever has a real understanding to recognize what the dog's body language is saying, what other dogs' body languages are saying. But we've talked a lot about how to socialize your dog, how to introduce your dog to this challenge of other dogs, and it is ultimately we want our dogs to be indifferent about
Yeah.
dogs being around. That is ultimately what our goal
Love
is.
that.
That is our, when you see great dogs in our classes, when you see great dogs out in the real world, those dogs don't give a hoot about other dogs being around. They're listening to their
absolutely.
owners. They're easily called off. And some of the steps that we've talked about today can help you get there.
Yes.
But you do have to be tactful. You have to be careful about how you go through some of these training steps. But you can have that dog that all of our personal dogs. Our dogs will all love to walk together. If Shannon and I were to go out, I have Deegan and Mac with me today. Kale's got the other dogs over at the training hall. If we were to all go out for a walk, our dogs would be happy, content to be running around, doing their thing. When we called them back, they'd all come back. When you asked them to lie down, they'd all lie down. They can be social, but they don't have to be playing and,
absolutely.
I don't know. It just sort of brings me back to the idea that I just want my dogs to not care about other dogs.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just walking my dogs on the property here before we sat down to record podcasts, and one of the other instructors was walking her dog as well. And, we passed and had a little chat. I had Ned lay down for a minute while we had a chat, and she had her dog sit with her while we sat and, had a little conversation, and all our dogs just hung out and, sniffed the ground and whatever while we chatted. And then we went on our merry way. And, there's no reactivity. There was no need to play. It was just a moment of chatter, and then okay, you enjoy your day, and here I will too. And all of our dogs have learned to have nice manners when they see each other, so it was no big deal for the dogs.
Now, if you're looking to get these kinds of skills for your dog, if you have a dog that's over 5 months, we have a life skills online training program. And if you have a puppy or you're about to get a puppy, we've had lots of people joining us recently who are saying like, I'm going to get a puppy in 5 weeks and I just was looking for training. You can join our Puppy Essentials program. We also have membership programs. Once you've completed the programs, you can hang in there because you have access to dog trainers 7 days a week. You can reach out and have these conversations addressing the things that whatever pops up during the day, you can speak to one of our trainers and get a solution to that problem before the day is over, which is really, this is the kind of online training I would have wanted before I was a dog trainer. This is the kind of support that is makes a difference, really makes a difference in your training.
People always ask if they can take us home, and we've always had to say no before now, and now you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you're interested in that kind of training, check out the link in the show notes below. And we'd love to have you join us here at McCann Dogs. Now, on that note, I want to thank you guys for joining us. The first time here, is it your first time here? Hit that subscribe button or that follow button, depending on where you are listening. And if you're watching us here on our YouTube podcast channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We publish new episodes of the podcast every week to talk about how dogs think, how dogs learn, and how to best approach your training challenges. On that note, I'm Ken.
I'm Shannon.
Happy training, guys. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the McCann Dogs podcast. And if you'd like some more training resources, be sure to check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at McCann Dogs. And if you'd like to train with us online, be sure to check out the show notes below for our My Dog Can online training program, where we know in just a few weeks, your dog will become a well-behaved family member. Until then, happy training.